Successfully stopping smoking is kind of a two-step process. The first step is detoxifying yourself from nicotine. That is basically a 3-day process, or I should say an up to a 3-day process. Some people seem like they peak on the first day, some on the second, some on the third, but once you get through the third day, the peak intensity of withdrawal will generally start to dissipate. The second stage is not as predictable and can take quite a long time. And that stage is breaking the triggers to smoking. You got to understand, smoking is tied into so many activities of your day-to-day life. It basically came down to any activity or routine that you would do that lasted, 20 or 30 minutes, somewhere down the line got tied into smoking. In the video, Why Do People Smoke? It goes in through diagrams showing how the nicotine level dropping will cause you to smoke more. Things that cause you to drop nicotine quicker, like drinking and stress, they'll cause you to smoke more in those times, and those become very powerful trigger. But any event that takes 20 or 30 minutes that you do repeatedly throughout life will get tied into smoking. The way you break those triggers, to break those patterns, is experiencing them after you quit smoking without taking a cigarette. But there's the catch. You don't experience everything, in a 24 or a 48 or a 72-hour period. There's some events that you do, once a week. The laundry, you may only do that once every 2 weeks. Well, the first time you go to do it, you're going to want a cigarette. The second time you go to do it, it'll be a little bit less, but you'll probably still get thoughts. But then after a while, that'll be it. The first time you go mow your lawn, it used to be you'd get to a certain part in the lawn and you'd have to stop and have your cigarette break. Well, you weren't stopping because you needed a break. You were stopping because you were in drug withdrawal and you had to smoke, and that became the cigarette break. So the first time you go cut the lawn, it'll trigger. But let's understand something about cutting the lawn. If you quit smoking in the middle of the winter, you may not cut the lawn for 5 or 6 months, at which point the trigger will come, and it will come out of nowhere as far as you're concerned. I mean, you hadn't thought about cigarettes for days at that point, maybe weeks, maybe a month. And then all of a sudden you're doing this routine and it hits. And it hits hard. It's like you get to the section of the lawn and you're supposed to smoke. So the thoughts that happen over time can really catch you off guard. When you were getting those thoughts the first few days of quitting, you were expecting them. It was no big deal. You knew it was going to happen. If you went too long without getting thoughts, you were pleasantly surprised. It was the type of thing you thought was going to be bad all the time. But when they come out of nowhere, and they do come out of nowhere, you have to understand the things that will trigger thoughts. You may run into a person who never smoked a day in their life, never once. And as soon as you see them, you really want a cigarette. And that makes no sense to you. If you run into your old smoking buddies, if you run into the person who ever gave you the first cigarette you ever smoked in your life, and you want a cigarette, you understand that. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm a smoker with that person. But the non-smoker, why? Why should that trigger the thought? Well, maybe this was a person who really disliked your smoking. Maybe this was a person that made you uncomfortable when you smoked. In fact, they made you so uncomfortable because you knew their dislike about it that you made sure that before you'd ever go see that person, you'd smoke a few extra cigarettes. So if you had to put up with them for, an hour or longer, you'd be prepped. Well, as soon as you left that person, or as soon as you left the line of vision of that person in the past, you would automatically likely be going for your cigarettes. You had to make up for all that time you didn't smoke. In your mind, you were a smoker all those times you were with that person who just wasn't smoking and basically going into withdrawal during the tail end of the visit. And as soon as they would leave, you would light up, and that would be a very powerful trigger at that point. Well, now this is your first time encountering them, and so even though you maybe didn't think about cigarettes for days or weeks prior to that little event, as soon as you see them, they make you want a cigarette. There's going to be lots of little things that will trigger this. But again, keep in mind, the first 3 days when you quit smoking, everything was triggering it. It was on top of drug withdrawal. You got through that. That's why you're where you're at now, because you got through that initial time period. If you got through that, where everything was triggering and withdrawal was complicating it, you got through that without smoking, you'll get through these too. But it's a matter of having your guard up. And it's hard sometimes to have your guard up. It is. It's hard to be prepped for something that you don't know is going to happen. You just can't realize it. Again, one of the videos is, hitting the point of just waking up every day and saying, I'm not going to smoke that day. And that's the reason for that. You want to be prepared that things may come out of nowhere. And you don't have to fixate on not smoking often, but at least once a day. Again, when you wake up every day and say, I'm not going to smoke today. Realize you may get a moment that day. Even though it may not have happened for a long time prior to this, you might get a thought that day for a cigarette. Have your guard just up and realize, yeah, you may want cigarettes every now and then, but you don't want to go back to smoking. It's a matter of remembering cigarettes where they were at the end and where you were at the end of your smoking. You were so irritated with smoking, you put yourself through drug withdrawal to get off of smoking. You had a strong desire to quit. It's obvious by the fact that you did it. So it's a matter of reinforcing that, remembering why you quit, remembering why you don't want to go back. Understanding that things will pop up occasionally that trigger the response, but a trigger will never put you back to smoking. It won't. Unless you do one act during that trigger, and that is giving into it. Taking a cigarette with the idea like it's just going to be the one. Understand, your options now. It's been what they've been for a long time as a smoker. You could smoke nothing, you could smoke everything. But there's no in-between choice. It's when you think about the in-between choice, you create thoughts that seem insurmountable because you start to go into, again, this debate. I want one. No, I don't. One sounds great. No, it doesn't. Oh, just one, not just one. You can't end that debate. You can't end that discussion. Both sides sound like they have merit. Change the discussion. Again, don't tell yourself you don't want the one, you do. That trigger is occurred. You want a cigarette. But now ask yourself, do you want all the others that go with it? And do you want all the problems that go with the others? The smells, the expense, the medical implications, the social problems, the professional issues that some people have, just being viewed as a smoker, professionally as a problem. Look at cigarettes in their entirety, the package deal, and ask yourself, do you want them under those terms? And if you don't want them under those terms, just remember, all you need to do so you don't ever have to take them under those terms again is stick to the personal commitment you made the day you stopped to never take another puff.